Good evening and welcome to St. Peter's Hove. I'm Father Alexander, and here we are starting off our trek, our walking tour through the Bible and entering the territory of the book of Exodus, the second book of the Bible. Now, and therefore the second book of the Pentateuch, because the first five books of the Bible are known as the Pentateuch. Our Jewish brethren call them the Torah, the law. The book of Exodus is a challenging book in some ways. And the first thing, of course, is I've said this before, but I'll say it again. The book of Exodus represents the coming together of three distinct pre-existing accounts. Now, you can be quite interested in this, or you can be quite not interested in this. You don't really have to be interested in this. But even if you're reading it in English, you can tell that certain things are told twice, and certain things are told once, but from a different point of view. In other words, there have been two pre-existing accounts which have been diced and spliced. But in fact, there were three accounts. There's the Elohist, there's a Yahvist, and there is the priestly account. But these three accounts are three different traditions, but they all say more or less the same thing. And clearly, the person who brought the book of Exodus into its final form didn't want to lose anything from any of those three accounts. They're all equally important. So that's the first thing. But the next thing about the book of Exodus is this. It's an incredibly important book for us Catholics because it is the book where we learn the Ten Commandments. We learn the concept of the covenant even more than we did in the book of Genesis. We'll be looking at that. We'll learn about the idea of election, and we see foreshadowed baptism. And baptism is what makes us into Christians. The covenant of baptism, which we live out by keeping the law that was first given on Mount Sinai. So you see, therefore, the book of Exodus is rather an actual book for us. It's an important book for us. However, there are one or two things in the book of Exodus that might make you pause. First of all, the book of Exodus is very anti-Egyptian in its tone. Now, the children of Israel have been enslaved by the Egyptians, and the children of Israel then proceed to be liberated from Egypt by the intervention of God. But the intervention of God is such that the Egyptians are truly punished for enslaving the children of Israel in the first place, and no mercy whatsoever is shown to the Egyptians. The killing of the firstborn and the drowning of Pharaoh's army seem unnaturally vindictive to a modern audience. And that is undoubtedly true. Now, one of the things is, of course, when we look at the book of Exodus, we often think, baptism, the Red Sea, the crossing of the Red Sea is a prefiguring of our baptism, quite correctly. But the book of Exodus should not be reduced to some sort of allegorical story or a fable. These things actually happened, shall we say, or rather, put it this way, the person who wrote the book of Exodus undoubtedly wants us to think that these things actually happened. And also, the person who wrote the book of Exodus did not see the Egyptians as symbolic figures, but as real people who lived real lives and who were really punished in real life. And also, the person who wrote the book of Exodus wants us to see as Egypt as a very bad place to which we're constantly tempted to return. Now, of course, that means Egypt is sinful, but also Egypt is actually real. It's not just a symbol of sin, it's a reality of sin. As such, Pharaoh and his horsemen deserve to be drowned in the Red Sea as it returns. The firstborn deserve to be slaughtered, and so on. But of course, we don't believe in the death penalty anymore. We don't believe God is vengeful. We don't believe that God goes around killing people, and therefore this bit of the book of the book of Exodus, is a bit hard to take. So we've got a bit of a problem there. And of course, people who want to point out that the God of the Old Testament is a vengeful God will point to the book of Exodus with great ease and find plenty of examples. What I would say is the book of Exodus represents the self-understanding of the children of Israel at that time. It represents, in dramatic form, the idea that the children of Israel had been liberated from slavery, and it doesn't reflect what we now know about God, which has crept up on us after many centuries of studying God and listening to his revelation of himself, that God is all loving and all merciful, and he loves Egyptians as much as he loves Israelites, and indeed as much as he loves us. So the internationalist perspective of the book of Exodus simply isn't there. That comes much later in the Old Testament, but it certainly comes in the Old Testament. As for the historical part of the book of Exodus, there's actually, the Exodus is datable to roughly the time of Ramesses II, because there is the name Ramesses is mentioned, and we're meant to think of this happening at the time of Ramesses II. And indeed, many people have said, oh yes, it happened in such and such a time. It happened more or less, probably, again, you know, they're not writing history, the people who wrote the book of Exodus. We love history. They weren't particularly interested in history. They were interested in what God had done, which is rather a different subject. It probably happened about the same time as the destruction of the Minoan civilization in Crete. But more about that much later. All the very best for now. Bye.